なんだその棒切りは。
我が流派の棒でがす。これでお相手する。
俺をバカにするのか。刀の刑。
刀使えば命さ関わりますとも、この棒なば安寸。当たっても骨折るぐらいですね。
平侍の分際で生意気な。切るぞ。
And good morning, everyone in the West, and good evening, possibly everyone here that is probably watching, possibly watching. Welcome back to the Saint Ronan channel. And tonight, we're going to be doing tonight and today for you guys in the West, we'll be doing something a little bit more different. We're going to be looking at a book that I managed to grab out of Texas, but yeah, like strange. You find this kind of samurai book in a freaking in the West, right? Well, the Bladesman Miyamoto Musashi's knowledge just goes far wide. Now, what do you think is this doing in a Christian channel? Well, this is not to say that my channel has deviated from reading the Word of God. And what I'm reading to you is not one on one one to one with Christianity or correspondent with Christianity, but there are some insights and very useful philosophies that we could use in here. Not as to say that this will be replacement for the Word of God, but I'm just saying that there are useful things in this book that we could use. Now, the good thing about this is we can disagree, right? So, as we venture on, before we get into the Book of Earth, let us first read the preface. I mean, the introduction. So, welcome to the book reading of Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, Book of Earth, number one, and then we'll be going into the Bushido Code just a little bit. So, welcome to Musashi's Book of Five Rings, the definitive interpretation of Miyamoto Musashi's classic book of strategy. Kind of like reading Sun Tzu, but this time this is coming from a duelist who, by some myth, or by some legends, or by some rumors, um, he was thought to never have lost a duel. Anyway, introduction. My name is Miyamoto Musashi. Okay, sorry, can I do that again? Sorry. My name is Miyamoto Musashi. I have killed over 60 men in fights and duels. When I was 60 years of age, I looked back upon my life and in a flash of wisdom realized that all my victories were based on either great luck, an innate ability, or perhaps the fact that the methods of other schools were inadequate. When I came to terms with my own skills and abilities, the realities of what I had accomplished held me to a higher principle that left me no choice but to depart from the commerce of the world, seek isolation, and tear my soul apart so that I could examine what I already seemed to know instinctively. I practiced and meditated constantly until I came to understand the workings of the spirit. I am considered to be the greatest swordsman Japan has ever had. It was during my fights and duels that I developed my own style of two-sword fighting. Although I was committed to my sword, I was also dedicated to learning painting, sculpture, and poetry. I instinctively felt it necessary to understand the arts and be accomplished in them. But my prime focus was on swordsmanship. I was not a particularly religious person, although I know Buddhism, Shintoism, and Confucianism and am aware of their tenets. What will be changed in my teachings with the passing of time cannot be known. There are, however, specific warrior attitudes that make good sense for the martialist. These warrior attitudes are succinct and definitive. So keep this in mind, guys, because there might be things that could be somewhat relatable or can sound relatable, but in consequently, like this is like this some of the words he's about to say has nothing to do with what we believe in. Okay, he's just basically here. The reason why he wrote this was coming to terms to his own weakness and coming to terms with some external factors that led to his victories. That most of these victories weren't of his own, but other external factors too, admitting that it was either talent, luck, or the fact that being an external, or this being uh, an external instance, the technique that other schools taught were inadequate, right? Or the inadequacy of some techniques or fighting styles, right? Second page of this introduction. It may seem that I am repeating the same thing over and over. While it is true that I am doing this, it is only to enforce my teachings upon you. By constant repetition, you will soon come to understand my way of strategy. Strategy. I will not leave it to you to try to quickly grasp my ideas in passing. The Book of Five Rings is divided into five sections called Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, and Nothingness. Earth lays the groundwork for the study of the whole book. Water explains attitudes of warriorness, though through an understanding of strategy. Fire teaches the fighting with the principles of earth and water. The Book of the Wind describes the differences between my school style and the styles of the other schools. This is how we're able to get into the inadequacy of some schools. The Book of Nothingness describes the way of nature as the true mode of being. I have not followed the paths of other men. I have lived without the benefit of a teacher, and by my own devices I became the master of myself, and thereby a master of the sword and the brush, never differentiating between any of these arts. It should be understood that without the assistance of a teacher, many roads become open to a practitioner, some on the correct path and some on the incorrect path. It is not for everyone to be without guidance. Only a few, and they are exceptional, can make a journey to wisdom without a teacher. You must have extraordinary passion, patience, and self discipline to make a journey alone. The goals must be understood definitive, and no diversion can be acknowledged or permitted if you are to attain enlightenment within the sphere of a chosen art. This is a very difficult road to travel, and not many are made for it. It is frustrating, confusing, very lonely, certainly frightening, and it will sometimes make you think you do not have much sanity left to deal with the everyday surroundings of your world. Also, there is no guarantee that you will attain perfection. It must all come from inside you without any preconceived notions on your part. So we begin. The Book of Earth. No man is, yeah. So let me say this again. I'm going to put this down here so that I'm going to put this here. I'm going to put down here Book of Earth so that you all know where we're at. Okay. So currently we're in the Book of Earth. All right, let's go. No man is invincible, and therefore no man can fully understand that which would make him invincible. Even with complete and thorough study, there is always the possibility of being defeated, and although one may be expert in a particular form, mastery is something a man never stops seeking to attain. It is doubtful that anyone truly understands the real way of strategy, much less truly lives it. Yet military leaders must have some understanding of strategy, and they must pass it on to their warriors, regardless of the limitations of their own understanding. There is no way to salvation, whatever the manner in which a man may proceed. Now, this is not connotating to Christian soteria. This is connotating to the idea that no man is invincible. No one can ever fully grasp that would make one invincible. So we are not invincible. We're fallible creatures. And then, although we are good in some parts, there's always a thing to brush up, relearn. There's always the need to rethink and reimagine, self-reflect, because a perfect person wouldn't have to do that. An invincible person wouldn't have to do that. They wouldn't think if their technique is lacking. Keep in mind the word lacking. Because of this, and because of our vulnerability, this is why Musashi ends up saying, there is no way to salvation. Everything that we do has either a loophole or a weak point that our enemies or our opponents could exploit. All forms and variations are governed by the eternal intelligence of the universe that enables a man to approach perfection. Okay, so Miyamoto Musashi here is kind of a Carl Sagan, because he believes that the universe is and all there is. It may be in the arts of music and painting. So let me reread that again. All forms and variations are governed by the eternal intelligence of the universe that enables a man to approach perfection. It may be in the arts of music and painting, or it may be in commerce, law, or medicine. It may be in the study of war or the study of peace. Each is important as any other. Spiritual enlightenment through religious meditation, such as Zen, or in any other way, is as viable and functional as any way. Certainly, in the way of the sword or the fist, a person should study as they see fit. A warrior should have an understanding of the peaceful arts as well as the killing arts. This is a twofold way. If a man chooses a certain way and seems to have no particular talent for this way, he can still become a master if he so chooses. By keeping at a particular form of study, a man can attain perfection, either in this life or the next, if a next life is believed in, which I as a Christian don't. But if I were to believe in the next life, that would be called tomorrow. A chance to do better than yesterday. The warrior, however, understands that the end result of any study is a kind of death, sublime, not necessarily physical, before the attainment of perfection. Many different types of people have been known to die for either the right reasons or the wrong reasons. The only shame in dying incorrectly is to die a stupid and meaningless death. To die as a warrior means to have crossed swords and either won or lost without any consideration for winning or losing. There is just not enough time, and generally there is not enough strength in the resolve of any man to do otherwise. In all accomplishments of war, the warrior understands that the only real measure of his ability lies in being able to beat men in fights, regardless of their nature. Failure in any other area is not to be construed as a true test of a warrior's mettle. The true virtue of strategy is in allowing us to overcome all odds in daily life and in helping us attain the closest state we can to being one with the supreme power before going into battle. The development of warrior consciousness is an ongoing thing. Each new experience continually leads to new challenges. The way cannot be learned through frivolous contests in which the outcome is for the name of a school or a large trophy. It can only be realized where physical death is a reality. This is also one way of Miyamoto Musashi saying that fighting is serious business. It may be fun, it may look fun, but trust me, you don't play fighting. Fighting isn't fun. I learned that the hard way when I got beat up, not just in my first amateur matches, but my first amateur match. Preparation is no joke, it's something taken seriously. Also in grappling fights, and also in sparring sessions. And I tell you guys, like being at the receiving end of a clean, straight hand is not fun. I tell you that much. You're welcome, HMS. The way of strategy. So next context. The way of strategy. The way is a specific and determinedly deliberate methodology. The ancient masters must be studied constantly without respite, even when the practitioner thinks he has grasped the knowledge. It is important to realize that technique is not the end of an art. It's not the techniques of an art is not it could be something that defines it or makes it distinct from all the other arts, but it's not the be all end all. Those good in technique, regardless of the art they pursue, are not necessarily able to teach the true meaning of an art. Yeah, because you don't know that art the way the art knows itself, nor you know that art the way the author of that art knows it. So whenever somebody tries to throw in like for example, or this I used to get into these, online debates or online pages where, authentic Wing Chun, authentic karate, authentic Wing Chun from the Ip Man family, and I'm like, I mean, actually, Lumbik makes a good point. Authentic Wing Chun, really? As if you were talking to the monk Ning Moy herself. Yeah, no one could ever truly, not even the author of an art, because at least the author of an art, conceptualizing and creating it, could just as just as good as just touch the surface. And if he's lucky, he's able to get a finger through it, but only to a degree. So again, those good in technique, regardless of the art they pursue, are not necessarily able to teach the true meaning of an art. Beginning students who do not know this and who think that they are being brought to the threshold of understanding are not to blame so much as those who teach without understanding the inner and the outer worlds of the art of which they profess to be masters. It is useless for people who look good in play competition to think in terms of being masters. They appear to understand and as a result permit their own self importance to convince them that they are bearers of the truth. Only through a constant search from within, based on one's own lifestyle, can the truth be known. It is absolutely a personal thing. Commercialism does nothing to enhance the reality of the truth, although it can lead one to the start of the path. A man cannot understand the perfection and imperfection of his chosen art if he cannot see the value in other arts. Like, for example, if I were to compare boxing and jujitsu, right? Uh, I'm not just limiting it to Brazilian jiu-jitsu or old jiu-jitsu or Japanese jiu-jitsu, but let's say we have jiu-jitsu and boxing, maybe French boxing, pugilism, or Mexican style, American style, Filipino style, you name it. Each of these schools of thought, but still but still under the same principle of what boxing and jiu-jitsu. As Miyamoto Musashi said in introductions, he managed to win because of the inadequacies of some schools. So put it this way: forget about the schools of thought under the art of jiu-jitsu and in the other boxing in the art of boxing. What can Japanese jiu-jitsu offer me that could help me overpower and outmaneuver and outlast a boxer? But then a boxer would also ask himself, what style of boxing or what style of footwork in boxing would help me be able to overpower, outwit, and make sure that the grappler can never lay his hands on me. Or even if he did, I'd still be able to sock it through him. Like, which footwork or style would I be able to utilize? Right? Now, if I'm looking at Japanese Jiu Jitsu, well, or if we go back to its older forms, that's where you'd find throws, joint locks that could cripple someone for life. And if we go to boxing, like what? We have Mexican boxing, like heavy hooks, heavy uppercuts, a really tight defense, and then you just square up on your opponent. And the down so I would tell you that while that aggressive tight while that tight aggressive Mexican boxing style can overpower a man standing up, what jiu-jitsu could do is utilize exploiting the legs. Though I am not saying that the intricate footwork of Mexican boxing is way too limited, but that's just the point of it. it the jiu-jitsu practitioner basically also learns control. Now, boxing does have clinches, but only to an extent, maybe because of the rules or maybe because for competition fighting. But if boxing were to expand itself further, like that of jiu-jitsu would, Except now, the way we understand jujitsu today is that it has absolutely no strikes. If you want to learn striking, go to either Muay Thai or boxing. If you want to learn grappling, it's either wrestling or jujitsu. But here, Miyamoto Musashi is telling us that these arts, whether it's boxing, whether it's Muay Thai, whether it's K1, whether it's Jiu-Jitsu, whether it's wrestling, whether it's judo, whether it's sambo, you name it, it all has its limitations. So this is so by negation of this, a man cannot understand the perfection and imperfection of his chosen art if he cannot see the value in other arts. So put it this way, I don't need to look, I don't need to take judo classes, although I will be humble enough to say that I do need a teacher or at least somebody who is experienced that can give me pointers. That if I want to be able to incorporate judo in my jujitsu, then I should humble up, shut up, and listen. But fact of the matter is that jujitsu would would be, if not complete, not limited, if the jujitsu practitioner would take pointers or his encounter with a boxer, or his encounter with a Thai fighter, or his encounter with a K1 kickboxer, or his encounter with a Kyokushin karate fighter. He would be able to adapt. I mean, sure, you could use adapting, but when you see the value of strikes and you incorporate that in your jujitsu, or you incorporate that in the art of jujitsu, while that's not necessarily that is jujitsu. I mean, put it this way: I want to incorporate jujitsu. I want to incorporate boxing and jujitsu. Now, not that these things are correspondent one on one together, but this is what I can do. I can say this as much. Okay, this is my jujitsu. My jujitsu, although my foundation and primarily focuses on grappling. I could utilize boxing to make my jujitsu, if not complete, but at least not limited. Right, the right fool for or the right fool. I'm so sorry. The right tool for the right job. Use anything from everything to your advantage. Yes. So or for example, Wing Chun. And I think if you've seen the movie Ip Man Zero, Ip Man was shunned for not staying true, for not staying stern to his traditions. But Lung Bik told him otherwise. Your master is not wrong if Wing Chun utilizes heavily on punches and only 30% of kicks. But foundations are not an excuse for limitations. It is only to give you, foundations are like a backpack that you carry along with you in the journey. It's like a backpack that you carry with you to the journey at the top of the mountain. And along the way, there will be hurdles. Um, and the mountain has different surfaces. Not all surfaces are flat. Some are rigid, some are zigzag. Or anybody there is a mountain climber, the surfaces are never even. So you need to make some tweaks a bit, right? While every, but I'm not trying to say that karate is boxing or arnis is karate or kung fu is sambo. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to make them one-on-one correspondence to each other. Okay, that's never my point. What I'm trying to get at is that if you wish if you wish to adapt to any fighting style, you must know the pros and cons of yours and the one who you're possibly fighting. For instance, we can look at a boxing match, and you have the Filipino boxer versus the Russian boxer. Now, what do they have in common? They utilize a lot of straights and a lot of jabs. Only that the Filipino boxer likes to throw some like the trademark 1 2 3 and then just waxes off, whereas the Russian boxer would just stay there long range, right? It's still boxing, but like a different school of thought, like a different style. Or let's say the founder of the Philly Shuffle. Could somebody write that down in the comments? The founder of the Philly Shuffle uh, versus uh, Floyd Mayweather's Vanilla Ice. They look the same, but what was it? But the intention of a certain thing is different. By the way, the Philly Shuffle goes way back. It's actually called a sword and shield stance from Kung Fu, or something you see in karate. However, do not misinterpret it. They're not one and the same. Although it does go way back, they're not one and the same because the conjurations and conceptions of a fighter or a master or the author of a given art are different. So we do have a sense of the maintaining of a distinction between different arts, and varieties are fun. So getting back to the main point, when you again, like when you look at a jiu-jitsu fighter and a boxer, you can already see the advantages and disadvantages. Like what can the boxer do that the jiu-jitsu will have trouble with? Well, what the boxer can do, the boxer has footwork. The boxer can just step to the side and throw a hook. But what can the jiu-jitsu fighter do that a boxer has a disadvantage? Of course, um, jiu-jitsu fighters or grapplers spend their time being able to control their opponents, much less being the first ones to grab them, and then they have control. But when Musashi was thinking about this, and then keep in mind that he won some of his battles either by sheer luck, an innate sense of ability or talent, but the latter is what struck me the most: the inadequacies of some schools. Some techniques are lacking, and if some techniques are great, but they do have weak points, and some have loopholes, right? So put it this way: let's say I am a jujitsu purist. I do nothing but the moves of jujitsu, especially in this culture. Absolutely no striking. Now I am and then I look at the boxer. Immediately, what would register in your brain is that I immediately understand my direct weakness. The guy has fast punches, the guy has quick feet, and he also has good distancing, which is also a key component for striking IQ. However, however, the boxer can keep running. Eventually, I'll be able to corner him, or I can just take him by the leg without him seeing it. I could parry a few punches, and then I either take him by the back, maybe do single leg, double leg, or single leg clutch, and transition to back clinch, and then just do like some form of osotogari from behind. So, or a Greco-Roman wrestler would just probably, I don't know, man. I mean, to me, Greco-Roman wrestling has not necessarily Baro, the judo throw. I mean, that throw actually goes way, way back. Different names, different principles, and different intentions of use and different interpretations. But to me, I think Greco-Roman wrestlers love to parry. They love to confuse their grapplers. They like to confuse their enemies, you know. But going back, immediately, I mean, you don't even have to be a fighter or a participant. You immediately see the obvious weaknesses between the boxer and the jiu-jitsuka, or let's say the judoka and the Muay Thai fighter, or let's say, for instance, a man with a knife to a guy with a gun, right? You see the immediate advantages and disadvantages. Like the guy holding a gun, it's just between with just the pull of the trigger, he's pretty much at a good advantage in distance. But then again, you have the limitation of being able to point the gun, and then you have to think of bullet trajectory. You have to think of how many mags you got. Whereas the guy with the knife knows obviously that he can't just take the gunman head on. So he has to do something. He has to think of something clever. Maybe play mind games, hide in the dark, find cover, make sure he wastes outlast him until he has no more bullets to shoot. In the same manner where you compare the sword versus the spear, or the dagger versus the archer, or the javelin versus the cannoneer, or the musketeer versus um, or the musketeer against the guy with a functional flintlock. I don't like that. Like, I get it. Like, everything has pros and cons. However, they're not completely useless. Now, of course, if I were to use a sword, I could fight in any surface, and I could fight at any distance. All it would take for me would to be adjust my distance, would be to be aware of my surface. Considering the spear, I really have to be far away from my opponent so that the end at which my opponent will receive the blow would be maximized. However, knowing one weakness is I can't let him get close. But however, just because I have a weakness doesn't mean I'm necessarily useless. So what can I do? What else can I do with the spear other than depending on the end of the tip, or the bladed end? Whereas also with the swordsmaster, what can I do against a spearman instead of complain about my disadvantages towards it, right? Whether you're a jujitsuka or a guy that shoots guns or whatever, regardless, there are always pros and cons. Fine, the gun is powerful, convenient in long range, and has three firing modes. If you run out of bullets, useless. However, if you're the guy that likes to be up close and personal, well, a lot of things to consider, but at least knowing your full disadvantages between a gunman, uh, it will take incredible amounts of patience and humility, of course, but patience too. So the undying principle in this tangent would be everything has pros and cons. It's either Everything has pros and cons, and immediately that registers in our brain, gives us opportunity to work. Just because something has a con doesn't mean something is completely useless. That is when we decide, or that is when our brains start to think, how is there a way we could do this? Like, how do we adapt this to this certain situation? Or again, going back, like Trump, I almost said fool again, the right tool for the right job. Use anything from everything to your advantage. Again, the right tools for the right job. Always. You can always try to bring your knife in a gunfight, but again, consider your disadvantages and advantages. You can bring a gun to a knife fight, but again, reconsider your advantages and disadvantages. I mean, can you take them all? Can you take them all? Like you can only carry so much magazines, especially when I guess you guys in your laws in the West, there is a certain capacity according to policy that you can only carry like how many amounts of extra magazines. Not that I'm an advocate for gun control like the left would. I mean, gun control is still important because you got to learn how to handle it. You got to learn how to respect it. You got to learn how to handle it with safety and also keep your mental states in check if you want to keep it and not just kill anyone out of a whim. You know, but to end this tangent, and I'm going to stop stressing it now, everything has its advantages and disadvantages. Every arts have their strength, but they also have their weaknesses. Again, for example, the jiu-jitsu fighter and the boxer, right? The boxer has swift strikes and good footwork, whereas the jiu-jitsuka has parry and control that he could use as a defensive and offensive tactic, and then can basically also fight in any position or in any instance, either in the ground or standing up. Right. Okay, so continuing. Following rules only permits development up to a point in technique, hence the limitations of some arts, especially in our culture. Now, one more thing. Look at karate right now. Karate, if we put it at its war or feudal context, would be something that the ordinary person just can't practice. Back in the day, probably you had to be that of the warrior class or one who could just simply afford it. But nowadays, anyone can do it. And then, if you could just simply walk conveniently to a master and ask him to teach you, before he even brings you to phase one, he would challenge you with some questions like, why would I even teach you this art? Like, what are you looking for? Because even the reputation of said master is also on the line. And although his technique, although his techniques will always show prowess and without fail, there's also the risk of producing bad students or students who are who are filled to the brim with ethics and conduct in school, but outside they're hypocrites. So following rules only permits development up to a point in technique. To advance further, the student and artist must learn and seek other knowledge. It makes sense to study other arts as well as those of strategy. Who has not learned something more about themselves by watching the activities of others? To learn the sword, study the guitar. To learn the fist, study commerce. To only study the sword will make you narrow minded, will keep you from growing outward. Everything is for sale, including men's souls. Hmm. Now, explaining to me, Sensei. A man cannot understand the art he is studying if he only looks for the end result without taking the time to delve deeply into the reasoning of the study. There is no purpose in trying to determine whether one is better than the other. If anything is anything, then everything is everything. Do not confuse profit with profitability. To sell yourself base To sell yourself based on the design of your school symbol is unfair to students and is, moreover, moronic because it fools the unknowing into thinking that skills is based on superficiality. Real. Besides, it is bad karma and it will come back to haunt you. You cannot fool with the spirit of the thing itself. It is a far greater wisdom than man can ever understand. In our society, there are four classes of people. Each fulfills appropriate functions and each is able to attain levels of perfection according to its own means. The specific ranks of the classes in order of their importance to the society are: 1. The samurai. Let me say that right. The specific ranks of the classes in order of their importance to the society are: 1. The samurai, 2. The farmers, 3. The artisans, and finally the merchants rather. Each is respected and disrespected equally by the other classes. He's painting an analogy here, just like with styles. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. And each of these classes now here, carrying the analogy forward, they are both respected and disrespected equally by other classes. Now, the samurai are warriors and live a high ideal. The study of their weapons is their prime motivation. As what Miyamoto Musashi said, he has stressed more importance in his swordsmanship. But that didn't stop him, however, from also trying to master poetry, sculpting, and I guess painting. That was the last one. That was the second one he said. The study of their weapons is their prime motivation. Farmers are next because they provide the food needed for the masses. Artisans are the craftsmen and makers of weapons and other products. Merchants are a ridiculed class because they produce nothing except profit from the work of others. Yet it must be understood that each has a viable and functional part within the structure of the society, and that even though, for example, the warrior class may despise the merchant class, we are all too aware of the need for them to maintain the economy. Money must be made to pay the army. Let me add to that. After all, money must be made to pay the army, as with the farmers and as with the artisans, for their work and effort and time that they put. Comparing, okay, so second and final context for tonight, because I also got to go to bed. Comparing the way of the craftsman to the strategy of a warrior. So here's another one, another comparison. It is important to understand what the goal of an art is. Once that is understood, it is easy to pursue the spirit of it. To study carpentry, you study the correlation of materials. So I can compare the way of the warrior to the way of the craftsman. Like certain materials, right? The carpenter studies certain materials and certain materials, right? And certain tools for a specific piece of carpentry. Whereas the warrior would study his adversary or opponent and the necessary tools he needs for said opponent. Again, still landing in the analogy of Trump, the right tool for the right job. Trump, anyway. Trump, anyway. To study the sword, you study war. Well, yeah, exactly. To study carpentry, you study the correlation of materials. To study the sword, you study war, weapons, and men. To study craftsmanship, you study the project, the tools, and men. Why? Some have the role for blueprints, some have the role for doing the impact drill, some are having the role of putting the screws together, etc. That is like the one common that is the mode in this analogy. Both the warrior and the carpenter study men, both their advantages and disadvantages. For the sword, you study war, weapons. Carpentry, you study materials in a project. But one thing that never seems to go away from the two is men. Like, what can they do? Fine, you have the means, you have the foundations, you have the basics. Now, for men, including yourself, how are you going to carry this out? Based on your knowledge, how would you apply all this? You will succeed or fail in either one, depending on your attitude towards the spirit of the thing. There can be no let up to your study, regardless of the path you choose, even though even though you may have mastered a particular level. You must search constantly for still more understanding of your chosen art. And it can be anything, like, for example, a physical therapist. He has strengths in orthopedics, he has strengths in musculoskeletal medicine, but again, realizing that he understands he also lack in neurological disorders or lymphatics, pulmonary, cardio, etc., etc. Sometimes it even takes realizing what your mastery is to know what your other limitations are. Funny how it is, right? There's always this interconnectedness of knowledge if you're humble enough and actually take the time to self reflect. If there is no discipline, how can there be a true realization of an ideal? How can a man be trusted to perform in society if he does not understand what society needs? Fine, you can be the jack of all trades and master of everything. But if you don't meet what society needs and you just bring the whole thing, it's not only a waste of energy, you're not giving what is needed exactly. How can a man be trusted to perform in society if he does not understand what society needs? To act in harmony with the environment of where you are, you must understand the need for certain rules. Okay. If you do not, then you will not be able to control others. If you cannot control others, then how can you expect to attain perfection in your own ideal? It is essential for the leader to know the rules of the game. Within the rules, within, oh no, sorry. It is, sorry, let me say that again. It is essential for the leader to know the rules of the game. Which rules work, which rules do not work, which rules can be changed to suit a particular need, which rules, when changed, will create additional problems, and which will not. Kind of sounds like our politicians nowadays. Craftsmen are familiar with the quality of the materials they use in their work. A man must not assume that another man's uniform or armament is an indication of his strength. Many warriors have always relied on, quote unquote, the look of their armor to intimidate the enemy. Do not assume that what appear to be finely crafted goods will hold up under use. The truth is that strength lies in the interior of the warrior, in his heart, his mind, and his spirit. The same applies to weapons. An excellently crafted weapon is incapable of acting of its own accord. It must be wielded. The extent to which a weapon is well crafted is based solely on the ability of the craftsman. The strengths and weaknesses of the materials used must be understood by the craftsman. Merchant, on the other hand, must rely solely on his ability to manipulate others into believing that his goods are the best. That is the way of the merchant. The farmer knows when his produce is good and when it is inferior. That is the way of the farmer. The warrior knows in his heart when he is correct in action and when he is issuing false bravado. All men are the same, except not like the same in personality, but in accordance with this analogy. All men are the same except for their belief in their own selves, regardless of what others may think of them. The supervisor on a construction job must assign tasks to his men according to their own abilities. Again, studying men. You get the project, you get the means, you get to understand this. Now, how are you going to apply this on men? What are the rules? What are the things to consider based on the project and the means that you're given? Remember, pros and cons. Who is good at what specific? Who is good at what specific aspect of the project? Who can lay floors? Who can tile the roof? Connect the drainage system? Should this not also be true for warriors? Who is good with low kicks? Who is good with waxing on and waxing off? Who has the best striking IQ? Who can wield the spear best? Who knows how to make a great shot with an arrow? And who is the most skilled swordsman among the five of you? Etc. etc. The warrior leader must understand himself before he can understand the realities of commanding others to do his bidding, especially when teaching is involved. Only when each soldier has been observed can the commander know which warrior will be able to perform a specific act. Otherwise, only chaos can result. The supervisor of a job should circulate among his men to appraise their strengths and weaknesses. He must praise them where they earn praise and admonish them when they do not fulfill the requirements of the job. But he must praise and admonish equally, or there will be a loss of morale and the job may not be finished correctly. Likewise, a commander must walk among his men if he is to expect a certain level of performance. If he is unaware of the skills of each warrior, how can he know to whom to assign tasks? The commander must praise and admonish in the same manner. This is a virtue of strategy. Why would a commander want a spearman to join the line of archers? Even if there is tremendous spirit on the part of the spearman, with no experience with the bow, his best efforts can only be mediocre. Yeah, like at best, he can fling his spear towards. He can fling his spear so it would join among the volley of arrows. But that's just about it. He might hit one, he might graze one, but that's about it. In a particular setting, in a particular environment, and of course rules apply in a way to some degree, what 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 is being sought for is the maximization of a certain thing. This is what is meant by minimum effort, maximum effects, right? Okay. Now we go for Bushido code. I haven't read much about this, so I'm going to stick with Britannica for now and see also invaluable and let's see. Oh, there's a more elaborated article on this particular website. I'm also getting a bit queasy from reading, but I do this for the sake of my viewers too. So anyway, let's take a look at the Bushido code according to Britannica first, right? So let's get a little background on what the Bushido code is and how it came to be. Bushi also means for warriors, right? Or warrior class. So Bushido or Bushido. So I'm just gonna maximize this and zoom in for the benefit of you guys watching, probably on your phones too. So just let me get rid of that banner so we can see the whole thing. Okay. So Bushido, the code of conduct of the samurai, or Bushi, warrior class of pre-modern Japan. In the mid-19th century, however, the precepts of Bushido were made the basis of ethical training for the whole society, with the emperor replacing the feudal lord or daimyo as the focus of loyalty and sacrifice. Ethical training. Well, to me, it's more of an ethical set of rules too, something of which that you internalize and value and practice. As such, it contributed to the rise of Japanese nationalism following the Meiji Restoration of 1868 and to the strengthening of civilian morale during the Sino-Japanese War in 1937 to 45 and World War II. Instruction in the code was officially abandoned with Japan's defeat in 1945. Elements of the code remain, however, in the practice of Japanese martial arts and in the sport of sumo wrestling. The name Bushido was not used until the 16th century. Bushido was not used until the 16th century, but the idea of the code developed during the Kamakura period, or Kamakura period, between 1192 to 1333, as did the practice of seppuku, ritual disembowelment. At the moment, the Minamoto family, at the time, the Minamoto, sorry, at the time, the Minamoto family established Japan's first military government, Bakufu, headed by a hereditary leader called the shogun. The pres- so at the time, the Minamoto family established Japan's first military government, or Bakufu, headed by a hereditary leader called the shogun. The precise content of the Bushido code varied historically as the samurai class came under the influence of Zen Buddhists and Confucian thought, but its one unchanging ideal was martial spirit, including athletic and military skills as well as fearlessness toward the enemy in battle. Frugal living, kindness, honesty, and personal honor were also highly regarded, as was filial piety. However, the supreme obligation of the samurai was to his lord, even if this might cause suffering to his parents. Yes, so you really can't use the code anywhere, right? I mean, if one thing was when push comes to shove, the higher use of the code would only be towards your loyalty to the shogun, which is in a way messed up. During the Edo or Tokugawa period on 1603 to 1867, uh, Bushido thought was infused with Confucian ethics and made into a comprehensive system that stressed obligation or duty. The samurai was equated with the Confucian perfect gentleman, as was taught that his essential function was to exemplify virtue to the lower class. Hmm. So the people look to the samurai for guidance as well. Obedience to authority was stressed, but duty came first, even if it entailed violation of statute law. Which which gives me an idea that Jin Sakai is not completely in the wrong here, which is why the emperor is looking for him now throughout the island of Tsushima. If you guys ever have played the game. So again, obedience to authority was stressed, but duty came first, even if it entailed violation of statute law. The extent to which duty superseded all else is perhaps best exemplified in the story of the 47 Ronin from the early 18th century. The samurai who had become masterless Ronin after their lord had been treacherously murdered avenged their lord's death, and afterward were all ordered to commit seppuku. All right, so that's how it came about. A mix of Buddhist practice with Confucian thought. Well, what I'm trying to take up here is the virtues that are of use to me. Although I'm referencing a Buddhist and Confucian source, or Confucian slash Buddhist train of thinking, that doesn't make me a Buddhist or Confucian whatsoever. Because if I were to be one, I have to practice it soulfully. Nobody accidentally worships something or follows something. They have to believe it first before they do. So first, so the Bushido code of conduct, closely tied to samurai culture, played an important role in the expansion of Asian art, Japanese values, and many important traditions like tea ceremonies and the art of samurai sword making. An unwritten code of chivalrous behavior, Bushido later became the basis for the teaching of ethics in Japan, with principles that still remain relevant today. Below, our editors explore the history of the Bushido, or samurai code, along with modern interpretations of how the code can be applied to everyday life. So, what is Bushido? Bushido is a code of conduct that emerged in Japan from the samurai, Japanese warriors who spread their ideals throughout society. They drew inspiration from Confucianism, which is a relatively conservative philosophy and system of beliefs that places a great deal of importance on loyalty and duty. Bushido Code contains 8 key principles, some 7, or virtues that warriors were expected to uphold. Ki for justice, courage or heroic courage, Yu, compassion, Jin, respect, Rei, compassion, Jin, integrity, Makoto, honor, Meo, Meo. Am I doing my Japanese right? I hope I am. Honor, Meo, loyalty, Shu, self-control, Chisei, Chisei. This is new for me. So the 8 principles elaborate here. Justice is a core value of the samurai. Incorporating the Bushido principle of justice into your life requires reflecting on what is fair and upholding the value of upstanding moral character. Courage, like justice, entails deciphering what is right and wrong. Courage requires the strength not only to perceive, but also to act. Right? Compassion is the ability to manifest love and sympathy through your patience. It also requires attempting to see the world from the perspective of another. This is an especially important trait for those in a leadership role. Understanding where your people are coming from. So justice is Gi, courage or heroic courage is Yu, compassion is Jin, respect and honor is Meo. Not mayonnaise, okay? It's Meo. 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 Respect means that you acknowledge your regard for the experiences and feelings of others. In order to collaborate with another person, politeness must be employed. Integrity. No, honor is Meo. Rei is respect. Rei for respect. What about, what's the other one? Integrity. Makoto. There you go. So let me try to memorize this. Gi, Yu, Jin, Makoto, integrity. No, Rei for respect. So let me do that again. Gi, so Gi, Yu, Jin, Rei, Makoto. Makoto, rather. Makoto, or integrity, in order to practice many of the other principles listed, one has to maintain integrity. This means living honestly and sincerely. Right. All of these other principles mean nothing if you don't have integrity. Fine, you follow them, but what do you follow them for? Why do you follow them for? Another common value that is expected also in Christian living and the demonstration of ethics and conduct and maintaining a godly character. All right, this one. Male. Samurai were warriors who upheld a sense of self-worth and lived by the highest code of conduct. In order to abide by the principle of honor, you must acknowledge your moral responsibilities. Right. So the kind of self-worth you have depends on how you reflect on this, how you uphold this. Hence, for such virtue to take place, you would also have integrity. Loyalty. Oh, integrity also. Why? Because if there's no integrity, there's no trust, so there will be no loyalty. First, stay true to yourself. Right? Why would you betray yourself, right? When fealty is given to another, this must not be abandoned even under difficult circumstances. And finally, loyalty. What is loyalty again? Oh my goodness. Chu. Right. So let me do that again. Gi, yu, jin, wei, makoto, meiyo, meiyo, chu, meiyo, chu, and chisei. Self-control in the Bushido code means adhering to this code under all circumstances, when with others and when alone. See? Even this goes with loyalty, with of yourself. Why would you want to make yourself a hypocrite now, right? To do something like that, or even subject yourself to the temptations of sin and end up doing it when what you want is a life different, something of which you want to glorify God with and walk with God too. Why would you want to return to your own vomit? So codes of ethics, behavior, or even doing your best to adhere to the nomos of Jesus Christ means nothing when you can't even control yourself from the temptations to come, and the courage for you to even act upon the statutes. I say this as a Christian. Not every iteration of the Bushido code includes self-control, but the book Bushido, The Soul of Japan, written by Inatsu Nitobe, highlights its importance. So where did it come from? Bushi is a synonym for warrior, root word Bushido. History of the samurai begins in the 8th century, when armed supporters of wealthy landowners began to be known as samurai. Towards the end of the 12th century, power in Japan shifted at the Kamakura shogunate. Military dictatorship was established. During this time, leaders popularized the use of samurai and codified their privileged status. Following a period of unrest, when Mongol invasion destabilized the government, leading to the end of the Kamakura period towards the end of the 14th century, there was a long era of peace under the Tokugawa or Edo shogunate. During the period of peace and prosperity, samurai were no longer required to provide military force. Instead, they were asked to lead civil governance. So the real samurai warriors were at the Kamakura period. At this time, they were just as good as policemen in the Tokugawa shogunate. Slowly, their role transitioned from being a type of knight to encompassing the responsibilities of a government official. In the Tokugawa period, the Japanese art forms popular among the samurai began to flourish. These included tea ceremonies, rock gardens, flower arranging, and a unique Japanese painting style that was developed during Edo period. All right, we'll get to this soon. Applying these. Justice at work, self at home. We'll get to these later on. Because as for me, I gotta go to bed. So what did we learn today? Well, the way of strategy includes knowing the pros and cons. Your strategy is only good as is only and the way of okay, so what have we learned? Everything has pros and cons, and the way of your strategy or the way of your inner tactics is as good as the limitations are just as good as your limitations are limited. And yes, the Bushido code basically has kept samurai in line from abusing their power or becoming or getting out of hand. Whatever these codes are, whether they're bred from Confucianism or Buddhist, because in Japan there was a wide array of beliefs. But what never went away from these codes, regardless of from what influence they were in, they knew that they had to maintain a sense of a moral. They have to maintain a sense of morals as warriors or bushi. So, what were the 8? Well, we have justice. So gi for justice. You have my goodness. I'm forgetting A already. Justice. I can't name it in order, but I'll try. Gi, which is respect. Gi, which is justice. Yu, which is courage or heroic courage in some works. Rei, respect. Honor. Meiyo, integrity. Makoto. 6 is the other one. Sin is compassion. 7 is Sin. 7 is loyalty. That is chu, like chu, chu, and 8 chisei. Self-control. Now this one has room for Christian in this Christian channel. Not that I'm allowing Buddhist, Confucian, or Shinto beliefs. But what I'm doing is taking these codes of ethics with us and have it stressed to us so that when we look at Jesus Christ, we look to him as our shogun, because even in the Bushido code, remember that regardless, your loyalty and your and all your best efforts, whether big or small, God wants our best. So we must always, as Christians, we must always seek to God too. Now, I'm not saying that this is one-on-one with Christianity. All I'm just doing is that this is something that you can incorporate in your walk. Now, as for me, I always say that Christ is the true shogun and Christ is king. So I'm going to live my Christian life as if I were a samurai and Jesus is the shogun. So with that said, even with this secular reading, don't take your salvation for granted and take your sanctification seriously. Show yourself approved to God and examine yourself whether you are in the faith. And thank you guys for being with me here on the work of Miyamoto Musashi in his deal on the way of strategy. Peace of Christ be with you. And my name is Saint Ronan, and I'm signing out in 3, 2, 1.